First, I want to thank Weston for putting this conference together. Weston doesn't remember much about it, but he was a student of mine at Butler University, and that's always, it's either a source of pride or embarrassment when your student succeeds so much better than the teacher. So well done, Weston. This is a good conference. This will be an informal talk, and I don't have PowerPoint, so I'll try to keep your attention. We were talking at the table during lunch about this idea of a gateway, of Taiwan being a gateway to Asia. And in some ways, that gateway to Asia is understood to mean gateway to China. It isn't just Asia, although there might be some interesting relations that Indianapolis and Indiana could develop with Indian businesses through Taiwan that has a close relation. But it really is a gateway to China. And that means something different than it did 2 decades ago, when China was still getting accustomed to being open, and when the services to get into the China game really were in places like Hong Kong or Singapore or Taipei. And so Taiwan, in some ways, was a gateway. But the idea now, I think, isn't so much that you need to go to a place like Taipei or Taiwan in order to get into China. You could just go to Shanghai or any number of cities that are perfectly happy to welcome you to do business. I think another way of thinking about it that means something to us is that business in the 21st century, especially with places like China and Asia, are going to be driven by connections, by links. We were talking at the table about a Sagamore Institute study of the 1980s when Indiana developed economic relations with Japan. That was actually a very risky move that Governor Orr made, politically risky, back in the 1980s. At the Indiana State Fair one year, one of the most popular exhibits was to pay $5 to get to take 3 whacks at a Japanese automobile with a sledgehammer. I mean, at that point, that was what Japanese business was seen as this terrible competitor. And so for Bob Orr and John Mutz and that team to try to attract Japanese investors to Indiana was risky. It's now seen as very sensible, maybe until the collapse of the automobile industry. Now we have to reassess it. But it still is seen, I mean, one of Governor Daniels' great successes has been continuing to attract that Japanese investment. But in some ways, what we learned in the 1980s, looking at this Japanese relation, was that it's different than China and the rest of Asia is today. With Japan, you actually can go to a few doors and meet the right person. China, where do you even start? So I would say you start with a network of connections. And here in Indiana, we have a lot of connections to China, some of them not so expected. I think Purdue, Valparaiso, IUPUI have Confucius Institutes that exist to link cultures together. One of my favorite China and Taiwan connections here in town is at the University of Indianapolis, the Museum of Master O Ho Nian, one of the greatest living Chinese traditional artists right here in Indianapolis. So we have a lot of these connections, but to be honest, we need more. And in some ways, that would be how I would see an economic relation between Indiana businesses and Asia and China via Taiwan as a gateway. It's to use the connections that Taiwan has built up over the years in China. Now, in some ways, as was kind of alluded to earlier in the presentations, Taiwan has made a shift with this current government that took power in 2008, trying to develop closer relations with China. It's a shift that, viewed one way, and I'm not sure I view it this way, but viewed one way, it's kind of reestablishing a closer set of relations that were being nurtured until the mid-90s. And at this point, I have to tell a story that relates to the Taipei Economic and Cultural Office. Back in 1997, I think it was 1997, I made my first trip to Taiwan, courtesy of TechCro, which is the DC Taipei Economic Cultural Research Office. I went with a junket of people from think tanks, and it was well worth the investment that the Republic of China government made in us. Lots of those think tankers wrote some really important things about Taiwan. I, on the other hand, rode on a scooter. My family is Taiwanese. My brother's lived in Taiwan now for 20 years, and this was my first time that I got to visit him. I was with this group of American academics and think tankers. We were in a van that was driving from different government think tank offices, going to interviews, and all anybody was talking about was the traffic and the driving. That Taipei traffic was just so over the top beyond what anyone else had experienced. I understood because my father and my mother had visited my brother the year before, and I asked my dad, well, what do you remember about Taiwan? And he said, oh, the traffic. It was just crazy, the traffic. And well, what about the food? Oh, the food was okay, but the traffic was crazy. And it's like, you know, my brother drove you all around the island. It's one of the most beautiful places in the world. And all you remember is Taipei traffic. Well, when I got there, I understood why. I would marvel at how few accidents there were, even though at that time Taiwan had the highest rate of road fatalities in the world. Based on all laws of logic, everyone should have died. So the fact that only 1% of the people died in traffic accidents was amazing. Well, my brother explained it to me as he was trying to convince me to ride his scooter through the traffic of Taipei. There really are just 4 basic laws that kind of govern traffic in Taiwan. They aren't even laws, because people didn't seem to pay much attention to laws. In a 10-minute drive, you'd see at least 5 things that if you saw in Indianapolis, that'd be all you could talk about for a month. Or this driver who went crossing 8 lanes of traffic up onto a sidewalk and went careening about. So people didn't necessarily pay attention to the law. What they paid attention to was a principle of physics. 2 objects can't occupy the same space at the same time. Everyone understands that. So they have an understanding of distances and tolerance of distances that was remarkable. But they knew that you couldn't have 2 objects in the same space at the same time. There was kind of a moral description or a normative description. That was that no one wants to hit and no one wants to be hit. So people out there on the road weren't trying to smash into others. They didn't want to smash into others, and everyone knew that about everyone else. A third principle that you had to follow, my brother told me, and he was right, be predictable. The day my brother got married, in front of my hotel, I knew I was going to see someone get killed for the first time. This tiny woman was hobbling across 8 lanes of traffic that weren't even slowing down for her. I mean, and I knew I couldn't yell because there wasn't anything. She was going across the road with all of these cars whizzing just inches away from her, but she was moving at a very predictable pace. Cars knew exactly where she was going to be, and there was no problem. And I didn't see anyone get killed. Be predictable. And maybe the 4th thing that was most important was it's not personal. Don't make it personal. So if I was in the middle of a shopping stall and a motorcycle for some reason was coming straight at me, which I wouldn't expect, say, at Castleton, but happened there in Taiwan, don't look him in the eyes. Don't try to make him guess which way you're going to go, because at that point, you're just a big, crazy American who's not doing what he's supposed to do, which is to be predictable. When you hear all the horns in Taiwan, it isn't because they're angry the way that we honk horns. They're just providing information. They're saying, I'm here. I don't want to hit. I don't want to be hit. So don't make it personal. In the mid-1990s, President Lee Teng-hui in Taiwan broke all 4 of those rules with China, or at least broke the understanding. The understanding that was going on between Taiwan and China until the mid-1990s was that relations were formalized, ritualized. Both Taiwan, the Republic of China government, and the People's Republic of China claimed to be the sole government of all of China. They were competing for the allegiance of a few dozen tiny African, Central American, Polynesian states, which of them was going to acknowledge, recognize which China is the legitimate government of China. They'd continue that kind of competition, and they would slowly establish more direct relations between the island of Taiwan and the mainland. And that was very predictable. Everyone kind of knew which way it was going to go. And then President Lee of Taiwan, of the Republic of China, said, you know, this is kind of crazy. You can't have two objects occupy the same space at the same time. It's silly for us to say there are two Chinas, both of which claim to govern China. Instead, there's China over there on the mainland, and there's the Republic of China here. And we're just separate. We're not, he didn't formally give up some of the claims because that would have caused problems, but it was very clear that was the direction he was heading in. It was very clear that he was no longer going to be predictable in the same way that relations between Taiwan and China had been predictable before. From the Chinese point of view, that assumption that neither China nor Taiwan wanted to hit or be hit, that seemed to be broken. And China, in fact, said, we may have to hit you because of what you're doing. And we ended up with President Clinton sending an aircraft carrier between Taiwan and China to make sure that no one wanted to hit, no one wanted to be hit. But what President Lee did perhaps most was to make it personal, and very personal. He started out by saying, I'm a proud graduate of Cornell University. I'd like to go to my class reunion. Even though I'm the president of the Republic of China, which the United States does not recognize, I want to go to my class reunion. And at that point, it became very personal. And so for 12 years, relations between Taiwan and China have been even more estranged than they were before. Now things have maybe changed a little bit. And it's possible for us to be thinking not just, we don't have to think the way that the government of Haiti thinks. The government of Haiti has a choice. Is it going to recognize the Republic of China as the legitimate government of China, or is it going to recognize the People's Republic of China, centered in Beijing, as the government of China? Countries like Haiti, I don't know if Haiti's made the shift as often. Some of the African countries that are subjects of that competition will take a large amount of foreign aid from the government in Taiwan, a dam, a sports stadium, some roads, and then maybe 3 or 4 later shift its allegiance to say that it recognizes the government of Beijing for an even bigger package of foreign aid. The happiest person I've ever met in my life was the Haitian ambassador to the Republic of China. That ambassador in Taipei was treated like a god because his government recognized the Republic of China. Every night he was out dancing with different Taiwanese women. And he knew that as soon as that ended, he was going to go off to be the Haitian ambassador to Panama. And that wasn't going to be any fun at all. So those few countries that are the subject of that kind of competition between mainland China and Taiwan, they have to have either or, and they put themselves up for bid. I don't want to trivialize them too much. I mean, they have legitimate reasons for doing that, but we're not like that. We can be friends with both. Good for us. I say, good for us, and let's make it even bigger and even better than what we've been talking about in this conference. I think that working with Taiwan, we can not only open up businesses for American companies in Taiwan, we can do more than just open up businesses for Indiana businesses to break into a China market via Taiwan, using Taiwan as a gateway. I think we could do more than that. We've got 3 enormous challenges that China is presenting to the world in the 21st century. And I think this is one of those cases in which both Taiwan and perhaps Indiana can make a really big difference in meeting those challenges. Working together with Taiwan, it isn't just an issue of finding ways to be able to get investment opportunities or export opportunities for Indiana businesses. Let's think bigger than that. Number 1 challenge, arts and culture. The 21st century is not going to be dominated by China. China has some economic, some demographic weaknesses that I think mean that we won't see a Chinese empire striding across the globe the way that the United States has for decades now. China won't exercise that kind of economic, political, moral power that the United States has within our lifetime. But China is certainly going to be more influential than it has been. And part of that influence is going to be art and culture. That's a good thing. It's a good thing because Chinese civilization in 4,000 years has achieved things that no one else has. And for us to learn more about Chinese culture, that's great. go to the University of Indianapolis, go to the Gallery of Mastereau, and be prepared to be amazed. Or for that matter, go to the Indianapolis Museum of Art. Okay, good. Let's learn about Chinese culture. The Taiwanese are great ones to teach us about Chinese culture because, you know, Chiang Kai-shek looted all the best art from the mainland when he and the other pirates fled to Taiwan. And the Chinese art and culture is so well represented at the National Museum there in Taiwan. Excellent. If we're going to learn about Chinese culture, I want our Taiwanese friends to help us. But I don't just want to learn about Chinese culture. I want to make something better. I want to take Chinese culture and Taiwanese culture and Hoosier culture and come up with something even more creative and vibrant. And I'm looking over at John Conklin of the Formosan American Policy Association for examples of really innovative Taiwanese cultural experiences that FAPA and the government in Taiwan has made available. We've gotten a chance to see Taiwanese history presented through tap dance, which sounds kind of silly, like a joke, but everyone says is a remarkable adaptation of an American cultural kitschy gimmick, tap dance, but mixes it with Aboriginal Taiwanese dancing, mixes it with now an art form that's spreading across Asia from Taiwan as a way of conveying culture and history. We've had Taiwanese puppets, the history of a Canadian missionary doctor presented here. We've had, what was the latest one? These were the dancers from that provincial university.
From Kaohsiung County University, and they did the cultural.
So it isn't just Chinese culture in Taiwan. It's taking the indigenous cultures, the different kinds of culture from China that have come to Taiwan, the experience with the United States, making something even better. That's a great challenge as China becomes more influential in the world. We don't want Chinese culture just to be the lowest common denominator of Chinese culture that spreads around. I want it to be more than just Chinese pop singers. And I want Taiwan to help us come up with a synthesis that's even better. There's a first challenge. Second challenge, the big challenge environmentally in the 21st century is going to be the greening of China. It's a challenge today. It's going to be a bigger challenge tomorrow, an even bigger challenge the day after. It's a challenge that's going to shape discussions over President Obama's clean energy policy, because senators are going to say, why should we make sacrifices when China doesn't? It's going to shape the Copenhagen negotiations in December as a successor to Kyoto is drafted. Chinese contribution to global climate change is enormous, and we have to help them do something about that. And by we, I mean people here in Indianapolis. We've got these great energy research institutes, the Lugar Center at IUPUI, a lot of small companies. We've been having windmill conference after windmill conference lately as Indiana tries to position itself as a leader in clean energy technology. We've heard today about the technological breakthroughs happening in Taiwan. Together with Taiwan, there's an enormous market in China economically to be able to help China stop destroying the world. Economically, that's great, but it's bigger than that. And so working with the Taiwanese to be able to target Chinese industry, the Chinese economy, that could be a great opportunity for Indiana businesses. But it's not the greatest. Here's the greatest opportunity and the greatest challenge for the 21st century. It's the democratization of China. I'm a rosy-eyed optimist in the long term and a dark-eyed pessimist in the short term. In the long term, I think that when people are given more choices over their lives, economically, they want to have more choices politically. And I draw that lesson more than any other place from Taiwan. Taiwan's emerged as quite possibly not just the most vibrant democracy in Asia, it's one of the most vibrant democracies in the world. Taiwan proves that those cultural arguments that a Confucian cultural system is incompatible with democracy, Taiwan's blown that argument out of the water. And I think, optimistically, that by the end of the century, we're going to have something that looks like a democracy in China. It may not look exactly our democracy. It may not look like Taiwan's democracy. It may not even be a democracy, but it's going to be a lot more democratic than it is today. That's my long-term optimism. When that happens, that's good for the world. My short-term and medium-term pessimism is that as China liberalizes, as China opens up politically, it's going to be dangerous. It's going to be dangerous for China and dangerous for us. When Russia first started liberalizing, becoming a democracy, one of the most popular politicians in Russia was Vladimir Zhirinovsky, a kind of buffoon-like fascist that would appeal to voters in Russia based on a kind of disgruntled unhappiness with the nature of the transition. Vote for me, Zhirinovsky said, and I'll teach the Estonians a lesson. Those Estonians aren't respecting Russia. If you vote for me, I'm going to set up enormous fans on the border with Estonia, grind up plutonium dust, and blow that dust on Estonia. Vote for me, and I'm going to restore the Russian Empire. I'll take Alaska back. Zhirinovsky made those promises. A third of the population in Russia voted for him because they were pissed off about the transition, but nobody expected him to get power. In China, if China democratizes, if China liberalizes, if China opens up voting to the 100 million floating population of China that's going to cities to work for a few dollars a day, expecting to get a better life that they see advertised on television, and still find themselves earning just a couple dollars a day, those people being given a vote, the appeal of a Chinese Zhirinovsky could be, from our point of view, unsettling. That's why I think that democracy in China is dangerous. There's going to be rocky roads ahead of us. And I think we here in Indiana can make a difference in that area. We've got some of the best Chinese the best researchers on Chinese politics and economics here in Indiana. We've got businesses that are working in China that are examples of what corporations can be. Some of you heard John Watkins of Cummins, who's also the head of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce in Beijing. What a great representative of Indiana for us to have in Beijing as an example of what corporate responsibility means. We here in Indiana can play a role in helping China navigate this 21st century, but it's going to help us a lot to be doing it in partnership with our Taiwanese friends. And so in thinking about this gateway to Asia or a gateway to China, my challenge, and it's a challenge you guys can take too, it's to think of it bigger, more than just how can we profit from this enormous economy that's growing so quickly and offers so many opportunities. That's great. Let's profit from that. Hearing Mark Cooper, I wanted to set up a business just so that I could work with Mark to export stuff. I have absolutely no idea what I would do, but that was such an inspiring talk. I now know I could be a success. Yeah, definitely. Okay, let's go for the economic gold. But let's go for more than that. I mean, if we're going to do something, why not do something great? If we're going to do something, why not think of what we can do to help green the Chinese economy along with our Taiwanese friends? Why not think about what we can do to help in whatever way we can, whether it's inviting Chinese students who are at IUPUI to actually come to see what democracy looks like here. Democracy isn't just people at Fox News yelling at each other. Democracy is, in some ways, events like this, in which citizens get together and talk about important issues. There are examples of this throughout Indiana, and we could be bringing Chinese students here so that when they go back, they're going to see this. They'll be infected with a civil society virus that's going to make their lives better, lives of their country better, and let's work with our Taiwanese friends on that. When I think about what happened in the 1990s, when Lee Teng-hui violated those four basic principles of Taiwanese-Chinese relations, of not taking it personal, of being predictable. We can't just turn the clock back and say, okay, now, 2009, we go back to the way things were in 1996. The world has changed a lot since then, and maybe we don't want to just make relations between Taiwan and China as predictable. Maybe we want to make it unpredictable and to try to do something bigger and better than we were doing before. So since I don't know anything about Taiwan, I do know a lot about Indiana and what we can do. And so I appreciate Weston giving me a chance to kind of share this vision and talk to you while you were eating your cake. And so thank you very much.